Hey, my name is Nick Savis. This presentation covers one applied consulting topic from each module. We got 5 through 8. The goal is to show how research can guide practical consulting advice in a real organizational setting, and especially in high consequence environments where performance and reliability matter. 4 topics will be covered. We have evidence-based consulting, cross-cultural consulting, safety culture speaking up, and measurement of performance and impact. Here's the roadmap for today. 4 consulting topics, 1 per module, and each one ends with practical recommendations. Each topic follows the same structure. First, a brief explanation of the issue. Second, 3 research articles and what they contribute. Third, practical consulting recommendations. Fourth, a short biblical integration segment about 1 to 2 minutes each, focused on values that fit ethical consulting practice. So often, leaders want fast answers, especially when performance issues show up quickly. Consulting tends to fail when it skips disciplined assessment and jumps to solutions. Module 5 emphasizes linking assessment and intervention, which fits the reality that organizations need solutions that are both evidence supported, realistic. Now that the consulting cycle is clear, here's the research that supports it and a specific action a consultant would recommend. Rosal, 2006, described evidence-based management as using the best available evidence to make decisions, while still applying judgment and considering context. In a consulting scenario, that means not relying on personal preference alone or on one story as the full explanation. Briner, Denyer, and Rosal in 2009 clarified a common problem. Evidence-based practice is often misunderstood as only academic research, when in actuality, it involves combining research evidence with local data and some stakeholder experience. Consulting becomes stronger when it uses all 3. Baer and colleagues, 2007, provide a useful model for organizational entry. Their work shows that what happens early, role clarity, self-efficacy, or task confidence and social acceptance, relates to outcomes like job performance and intent to remain. That provides a simple consulting target. If early performance matters, then entry practices should be designed to strengthen role clarity, early mastery, and healthy integration. Applied consulting recommendations. Start with a short assessment. Map the workflow. Identify where handoffs break down. Identify where newcomers lose role clarity or they lack guided practice. Here's a simple example. A new person. They start and get 3 different answers on what done right looks like for the same task. One supervisor says speed matters most. Another says documentation matters most. And a peer says just do what we usually do. That's not a training problem. It's a clarity problem. In assessment, that shows up immediately when the workflow gets mapped and the handoff steps are written down. A short entry guide that defines the standard and a sponsor who checks that standard in week 1 solves that faster than adding more training time. Design structured entry supports a short role guide, an active sponsor with defined duties, and scheduled feedback, which points at 7, 14, 30, and 60 days. Evaluate impact using simple metrics, time to independent duty and early rework or error correction rates. Let's do a little biblical integration. Ethical consulting is stewardship. Proverbs repeatedly emphasizes wisdom, counsel, and understanding. In consulting terms, that supports disciplined assessment, honest feedback, and decisions that rely on evidence rather than impulse. Stewardship also means building systems that help people succeed rather than leaving success to chance. Next up, Module 6, because even the best onboarding process breaks down if communication norms and cultural expectations aren't clear. Cross-cultural consulting is not only international. It applies to any team with different backgrounds, assumptions, communication styles, and power distance expectations. In a high consequence setting, cross-cultural friction often looks like silence, hesitation to ask questions, or misinterpretation of direction. Those patterns slow learning and create preventable errors. Here are 3 research findings that explain why cultural intelligence matters and how a consultant can build it into entry practices. In 2007, Ange et al. And colleagues showed that cultural intelligence can be measured and that it predicts outcomes tied to adaptation and task performance. For consulting, the key point is that cross-cultural effectiveness is not just personality. It includes capabilities that can be developed. Bhaskar Srinivas and colleagues, 2005, summarized adjustment research and showed that adjustment has multiple components. Work adjustment and interaction adjustment matter. When people feel less adjusted interpersonally, they communicate less effectively, which can directly affect performance. Schlegel and colleagues, 2021, reinforced this with meta-analytic evidence that cultural intelligence predicts work-related outcomes across studies. For consulting, that supports investing in CQ behaviors early rather than assuming people will figure it out. Applied consulting recommendations. Make communication norms explicit during entry, how to ask questions, how to request clarification, and how to raise concerns without stigma. An easy cross-cultural breakdown happens when silence is misread. In one team, silence means, I disagree, but I'm being respectful. In another, silence means, I agree. If a newcomer comes from a background where you don't openly challenge a senior person in front of others, they may not ask questions, even when they're confused. A simple consulting fix is to normalize one sentence. Please push back or ask for clarification. Questions improve performance. Pair that with a CQ microskill. Repeat back the task in your own words and ask, am I tracking the standard correctly? That reduces misinterpretation without turning it into a big cultural lecture. Teach simple CQ microskills. Check assumptions. Restate intent. Ask what success looks like. Confirm understanding. Use sponsor coaching to model inclusive communication early so newcomers learn that speaking up is expected. Biblical integration. Cross-cultural consulting connects naturally to dignity and unity. A Christian worldview supports respect, patience, humility, listening. In practice, that means building an environment where people do not have to fear embarrassment for asking questions or where difference is treated as strength that can improve team learning. Module 7 builds on that idea. When people don't feel safe speaking up, small misunderstandings turn into bigger problems. In healthcare and other high reliability industries, mistakes happen under time, pressure, and complexity. The key difference between reliable and unreliable organizations is often how quickly they learn from small errors or near misses. That requires speaking up behavior and low fear of consequences for honest reporting. Here's the research behind safety culture and error reporting, and the practical behavior leaders can reinforce immediately. Sexton and colleagues, 2006, validated the Safety Attitudes Questionnaire and showed that safety climate is measurable. For consulting, this provides a tool to assess climate rather than guess at it. Weaver and colleagues, 2013, reviewed the evidence for safety culture interventions and showed that culture is a legitimate patient safety strategy. Culture work is not just soft. It relates to real outcomes when interventions focus on leadership, teamwork, systems. Castro and colleagues 2015 examined fear of repercussions for reporting errors. They found that leadership support for safety explains substantial variance in fear responses. The consulting takeaway is straightforward. Policy is not enough. Leader behavior shapes whether people report and learn. Applied consulting recommendations define what happens after reporting. Leaders should clearly separate learning-oriented responses to honest mistakes from accountability responses to negligence. Create good catch reinforcement. Normalize reporting near misses as responsible behavior, not failure. Picture a near miss. Someone catches a documentation error right before it becomes an actual compliance issue. If the response is embarrassment, if it's blame or a public call out, the team learns one lesson: don't report it. If the response is consistent and calm, thank you for catching that. Let's fix the process and learn. Then reporting becomes normal. This is why leadership behavior matters so much. People watch what happens after the first few mistakes. That response becomes the real policy. Teach sponsors how to coach newcomers on raising concerns early, including what language to use and who to tell. Biblical integration. Integrity includes truthfulness and accountability. People should be able to admit mistakes. They should be able to correct them and protect others from harm. A culture that supports confession and correction without the humiliation encourages both ethical behavior and stronger performance. Now, Module 8. because recommendations only matter if outcomes are measured in a way leaders trust. Consulting advice. It has to be measurable to be credible. Without measurement, leaders cannot tell whether a change worked or whether it simply felt good. In high reliability environments, measurement needs to be simple. It has to be defensible and tied to mission outcomes. Here are 3 research anchors for measurement, and then a simple way to evaluate impact without drowning in data. 1995, Neely, Gregory, and Platts reviewed performance measurement system design, and they emphasized that measurement should be designed as a system, not a pile of unrelated metrics. For consulting, that supports selecting a small set of measures that represent what matters. Huselid, 1995, showed that systems of HR practices relate to outcomes like turnover, productivity, supporting that idea that structured entry practices can have measurable downstream effects. 2009, Richard and colleagues emphasized that organizational performance is multidimensional and measurement choices affect conclusions. Consulting recommendations need clarity on what performance means, what the time window is, and what indicators are credible. Applied consulting recommendations use 3 measures: 1 speed measure, time to independent duty; 1 quality measure, rework or error correction rate; and 1 retention measure, intent to stay. Track 30, 60, 90-day trends and compare cohorts before and after onboarding improvements. Here's what success could look like in a dashboard. At baseline, time to independent duty might be, say, 60 days on average, with a lot of rework in the first month. After tightening some onboarding, the target could be moving that average down to 45 days, while also reducing the rework. The important point is that speed alone isn't success. If time to independent duty drops, but rework spikes and the system is pushing people too fast, that's why the dashboard needs both speed and quality. Combine self-report with supervisor rating and objective process data when possible to reduce bias. Here's some biblical integration. Measurement is stewardship. It should support truth, accountability, and wise use of resources. Ethical measurements avoids distorted incentives and focuses on what protects mission readiness and people. Let me pull the 4 modules together into a simple Monday morning implementation plan. Immediate implementation can start with 3 steps. First, a simple entry checklist in a sponsor playbook so newcomers get consistent handoffs and clear support. Second, set week 1 norms that teach cultural intelligence, micro skills, and make speaking up an expectation, not a risk. Third, track a small dashboard, time to independent duty, rework or error corrections, and intent to stay, so leadership can see whether the changes are working. I'll close with the full reference list for the research and chapter anchors used across the 4 topics. All right, you're going to see quite a few references coming at you in APA format, alphabetical. I'll give you a second to read them. Starting with Ange et al., Bauer et al., Basker-Shrnivas et al., Briner, Cassio, Castell et al. All right, that's page 1. Let's move to page 2. All right, now we got Huselid, Levinson, Mullen and Cooper, Neely et al., Richard et al., Rosal. And final page, here we go. Got 4 left. Schlegel et al., Sexton again, et al., Weaver et al. That concludes my presentation. The 4 topics were selected because they flow logically from consulting process to cross-culture effectiveness, to safety culture, and then to performance measurement. Each topic was anchored in 3 research articles and translated into applied consulting recommendations. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Have a good night.